Thought Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
It is. She's here. She's even here full screen. Hi, everybody. Poetry, prayer, and practice. It is Tuesday. It is noon-ish, mountain time. So it must be time for us to hang out a little bit and explore poetry and prayer and other spiritual practices. If this happens to be your first time with us, my name is Tracy Brown, and I am your host. Every week we get together and we have an opportunity sometimes to explore prayer and how to use prayer in your life or understand why prayer is so important and powerful. Other times we focus on poetry, either writing poetry or how reading poetry can be something that leads you deeper in your understanding of spiritual principle. And all the time we look at spiritual practices, some that are very common, but often ones that you might not even think of as spiritual practices. Today, I get to spend some time having a conversation with Dr. Kasey Wilson. And you may have noticed, if you have watched the show before, you may have noticed that what usually happens is Tracy is having a conversation with someone and it feels like, wow, do they even know we're listening in or watching them talk? Because I didn't expect them to go there, or that turn changed direction quickly. So you really are eavesdropping on a conversation with me and my guest or guests that we don't script in advance. We don't outline everything we're going to talk about. And so it really is a free-flowing, candid conversation. So if it feels that way, great. Then mission accomplished. So as I mentioned, today my guest is Dr. Kasey Wilson. And I'm going to just tell you 3 things that I know about Kasey Wilson, and then I will invite Kasey to share any other information that she desires. So the most obvious thing to share about Kasey is that she is the executive director, the camp director, the boss and leader at Camp Cedar Ridge in Vernonia, Oregon. Second thing I'm going to share about Dr. Kasey. Dr. Kasey has both a PhD or a doctorate level degree. That'll be good. Correct me if it's not a PhD, but a doctorate level degree and a religious science practitioner license. This means she's both very smart and very spiritual. And the third thing that I am going to share about Dr. Kasey is that before moving to Oregon to run Camp Cedar Ridge, she lived in Hawaii. So there is lots for us to talk about. So let me get Dr. Kasey Wilson on the screen. Hey, Kasey.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. So nice to be here with you today.
You know, it's really challenging for me to only pick 3 things because there's so many interesting things I could say about you. And so what else, if anything else, you would like the audience to know about you, to give them some context about who you are and what you do in the world?
Well, the thing that comes to mind in this moment, as you're asking me that might be applicable to this conversation, is that I was born into a religious science family, and my grandparents were Christian Science. So that has given me a unique perspective, I think, and something that I'm really grateful for, that I draw on in the work that I'm doing now. I am so grateful for the people who built the church that I went to. It was also had a religious science elementary school attached to it. And because of that foundation that I received, I feel a deep responsibility for the work that I'm doing here, because I feel like it's now my turn to build something lasting for generations to come. People, I don't know the names of all the people who built the church and the school that I benefited from. And so I often think about what we're building here is for generations unborn to have access to the teachings that we have all received so much from. So I think that's my fun fact that I will add.
And it is a fun fact because in New Thought overall, and in Science of Mind specifically, or religious science, most people come to it as adults. And so the fact that, from your very earliest years, you were exposed to the teachings and to the New Thought way of life, and then even went to a school that was, affiliated with and run by a CSL, or a religious science center, it's pretty awesome, pretty different, pretty amazing, pretty rare. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I'm gonna start with something one of the three I chose. So just so people get a context of you, what's your doctorate degree in, and how do you feel you integrate your academic education with your spiritual beliefs?
That's a great question. So the degree is an EDD. It's a Doctor Higher Education Administration. For some reason, I have bounced back and forth in my career between running camps, conference centers, and retreat centers, and higher education administration. It does seem like maybe that sounds very different, but it's all about transformation and education in different ways. So that's what my degree is in. And I think the ways in which I utilize it are, making sure that I'm going back to, if I have a topic that I'm trying to work out, I will engage in that practice of a literature review, right? I'll go and look and find out everything that I can find out that time will allow, that other people have said about something, or the science around a particular question, as a starting point before I make a final decision or go in a certain direction. And that's, I think, very helpful in the work that we're doing now.
I love that. And you just said you've bounced, and you think of your whole career, you've bounced between camps and events and educational administration, and right now you're at camp again. I know a little bit about that, but give people some context, because apparently Camp Cedar Ridge is not your first time in leadership at a camp.
Correct. I was executive director at a camp and conference center in Southern California 20 years ago. I was there for almost 10 years. And then I was also at the largest camp in Hawaii, YMCA Camp Erdman, for a couple of years. And they were, one was a religious camp and conference center, and the other was really a youth camp where we did a lot of direct programming, very little retreat work. And so those two camps gave me sort of both types of experience, the programming side and the support side. And so, which is perfect. It's the perfect preparation for what we're doing here. This is the first camp that CSL has owned, and we're both serving as a retreat center for groups to do their own work here, and also working on programming some of our own events. And so I've just been very fortunate to have that nice combination of background.
Well, and you just took me right where I was going to go next, which is, all right, so that's like looking in the rearview mirror about Kasey Wilson, but right now you're at Camp Cedar Ridge, and there are people watching and listening who have no idea, like Camp Cedar Ridge. So you just mentioned that it is a property that is owned by Centers for Spiritual Living, which many of our viewers on New Thought Media Network are familiar with. But tell us specifically about Camp Cedar Ridge, or what happens there.
Right. So Camp Cedar Ridge is a 32-acre facility that can sleep about 200 indoors and up to 500 outdoors. We can have events that don't stay overnight to up to 1,000. So it's a large property. It's in rural Oregon. It is halfway between Portland and the coast. And the Centers for Spiritual Living purchased the property in May of 2022. So we're about a year and a half in to this new project. And you mentioned that some of your viewers are familiar with CSL and some may not be, but what we're trying to do is really have a new thought focus. So we have, of course, many CSL groups that attend the property. We also have some unity groups that attend, and some other New Thought. Actually, New Thought Media Network is going to have a retreat here, and we're reaching out to Agape and other groups to really be an umbrella for a New Thought approach, because it's about oneness. And but we also, I want to say, one of the things that we really want to do, some centers will say, we honor all paths to God, especially the one that you are on. And I would say we honor all paths to enlightenment or transformation, especially the one that you were on. And so we don't limit the groups that we serve to New Thought groups. As a matter of fact, let me read a bit of our mission statement. At Camp Cedar Ridge, we create an environment of hospitality where transformation, education, recreation, and renewal can unfold, supporting each group in fulfilling their individual and unique goals. We care for the property and provide meals, lodging, activities with intentionality, consciousness, and love. Our motto is discover the good, and we encourage each guest, employee, volunteer, and donor to discover the good in life and spread it. And so that focus on discovering the good rather than a specific spiritual tradition is, in a way, our way of exposing everyone that comes to the property to a certain level of consciousness, and encouraging them to discover the beauty or discover the good in life. And just that little bit of, I often talk about putting science of mind in the spaghetti sauce. And what I'm talking about there is, sometimes when you have a toddler who won't eat vegetables, you steam the vegetables and you put it in the spaghetti sauce, and the child doesn't know that they're getting it. And so our emphasis on discovering the good is our small way of encouraging people to seek the beauty in life.
Yeah, I absolutely love and appreciate that. And I also really am intrigued by this idea of discover the good. And sometimes in my head, I say, discover the God, but we'll just add the little O in there to say God, right? Discover the good and spread it. And the opportunities, it's one thing to serve groups that are already connected to New Thought, no matter which of the denominations or faith systems it is. But I think you're also doing that and providing a spiritual without being religious message or experience to the young people who come for basketball camps or for the weddings that are hosted, right? There are so many different kinds of things that the camp hosts or provides space for. Even the folks who come for swimming lessons or outdoor school.
Yes. With groups that are not connected or even aware, I would say a large percentage of the people who attend the camp are not aware that it's owned by the Center for Spiritual Living. Right. But it's really the consciousness in which we're serving, the way in which we work as a staff together as a team to serve people and what their needs are. And, sometimes we'll have a guest who is particularly needy in some way. And where we've challenged ourselves is to meet those folks where they are and ask ourselves the other underlying question: what is it they really need? What is it they're really asking for? They're saying whatever they're saying, but there's an underlying thing they're looking for. And maybe it's attention, and maybe it's love, maybe it's wanting to feel special, whatever it is. And so instead of resisting those sort of high needs clients, we try to go the extra mile to sort of overgive to reach that need that they really are expressing. And many times when we do that, the complaints or the asks or the extraordinary thing that we're dealing with just dissipates, because it wasn't about, we could argue and resist, or we can flow with them. And when we realize, okay, we've got an extra special challenge here, how do we show love in this moment? How do we show up in the way that we are really meeting what they're asking for? And a lot of times they go away, they'll thank us at the end, they'll go away having had a wonderful experience, and they don't really know what just happened. They don't know, but they know how they felt. And so we're building relationships in that way. And I always say that you can get a lot done if you don't care who gets the credit. Yes. So we're serving and we're loving, and it doesn't matter whether they know that the camp is owned by CSL or they know anything about New Thought, but they know what they felt and they know what their experience was. And it plants some kind of seed for a shift. And every group that comes here, we have a sign language phrase that we were gifted by Reverend Dr. Raymond Anderson. I always like to remember to give credit for that. And the sign language phrase is, I love Cedar Ridge, discover the good and spread it. So everybody that comes here, and our password, our Wi-Fi password is discover the good also. So if you miss the sign language event, you're bound to ask me for the Wi-Fi password. So, it's just very subtle ways of letting it be known that we have a little bit different viewpoint in life. And there are camps that don't allow certain kinds of groups that are outside their faith tradition and their worldview. And we try to be a home for those kinds of groups that might be turned away from another camp. Accepting people where they are and not judging what it is that they're trying to accomplish, whether that's our agreement, whether that's what we're doing or not. We're trying to provide a place for people to work out their own journey, whatever that is.
Well, you've got some fans in the house, in the room right now. Lori loves the phrase, I love putting signs of mine in the spaghetti sauce. Nice. And Mike shares that you and your staff are doing fantastic work. Yeah. And I'm really struck as I listen to you, which is silly because, right, I know a lot about what's going on at the camp, and I've been to the camp, but as I'm listening to you, I'm really kind of listening with, fresh ears, as if I don't know. And what I'm struck by is that we talk about servant leadership, and we say service is a spiritual practice. And as I'm listening to you, it's really, that's what I keep hearing, that our active spiritual practice is love, but it's service. It's demonstrating love through service to whoever comes on property. And I don't think we think about that. And a lot of people in their jobs, right? Their job is to provide service. But to truly do that from a spiritual grounding and as spiritual practice isn't easy, but that's what it sounds like you're doing. Yeah.
That is what our whole team are here for. And it's to work with a community and a group of individuals some of whom live here year round, some of whom come for various seasons, short or long, but they come here to serve in this mission, is unbelievably fulfilling. I did EST back in the day. Probably a lot of people did, right? Back in the 70s. And I remember one of the things that they talked about was that if you knew for sure what God wanted you to do, you would be happy doing it, no matter what it was, even sweeping up, cigarette butts in Times Square. You would, if you knew for sure. And that's always kind of stuck with me. And, in our tradition, we don't really have the, what God wants you to do, belief, right? We have more of an interactive relationship with Source, but there is something about, I feel like for the first time in my life, I absolutely know for sure that this is what I am here to do, 1000%. And the change in, my relationship with life now that I have that real certainty is transformative. And you know, this is, I joke sometimes that this is the most expensive job I've ever had. Because, and this, but it's also the most fulfilling, because it's not about, you know, benefits or compensation or, you know, vacation time or any of those things, or you know, building my my brand and my portfolio, you know, all of the things that were, you know, are sort of carrots in other jobs. It is about the mission, and it is so fulfilling to be 1,000% in, you know, every minute of every day, focused on one thing, and having a community of people who are like-minded, working side by side for the same thing, is just a tremendous gift in a way that it's hard to really explain. Like I'm at the place that I always wanted to be in life, where you were like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? I'm not sure if this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. But as I look back on it, I think the lesson, or the thing that I can share with people, is that now I see how all those other things that weren't quite it were the absolute perfect preparation for this moment, right? So I have an MBA, right? I have a doctoral degree. I speak Spanish. I spent 5 years on active duty. And I will tell you that my military background has come back. I mean, it's been 30 years since I was in the military, but so much of what I learned in the military has served me these last couple of years. I feel like that's one of the things I'm standing on most solidly. So all of these things that I did along the way that were almost it or not quite it, but I got a lot out of it, and then I moved on to the next thing, I could completely see the through line of all of that preparation for this moment. And so I guess I would say to somebody who is sort of in that place of, you know, I'm getting a lot out of this, but I'm not quite sure it's the thing, that maybe it's on the way to the thing.
Yeah, if we truly believe, like we are so quick to say, I know, or I believe the universe is conspiring for my good, that's not just with, I have food to eat today. Right. That is, as the building blocks of our lives come together, that there are times in our lives where, yes, everything that happened before is right there, providing you with what you need to know or understand or be able to do where you are here. And then that actually is helping to serve for where you might be 5 years or 10 years or 40 years down the line. So I also from a spiritual perspective get that what you described as, like, I know 1,000%. Right. This right here that I'm doing now, my life right here, my way of being in service right here, right now, is what this is about, what this life is about. And to not have any doubt about that. It is, you used the word gift. And for me, the word that went through my mind is, yes, it's a gift and it's a blessing. And the way you started the conversation was also related to, oh, I'm living my blessing, but my responsibility is to create a legacy that blesses others, people I will never meet, who will never know my name. And that too is a part of this upward evolution, spiral of evolution that most of us don't consciously recognize that we are participating in. So you've pointed out some, we're talking about Camp Cedar Ridge and we're talking about Dr. Kasey Wilson's journey, but really there's some very powerful spiritual gems that are just showing up because you are showing up. And I have a question because I'm really grateful for that.
One of the okay, I just want to tell you quick. I think, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I think we lost sound. Oh, okay.
I can hear you.
I couldn't hear you for a minute. All right. So I just wanted to also say, I went back to my grandparents who were Christian Science. My great grandmother became a Christian Scientist in early 1900, something like 19. I am always so shocked or impressed is the word I want. Impressed with the bravery that must have taken. At that time, she was a farmer's wife on a small farm in Minnesota. And, there was somehow that at that time it was more famous than it is today. And it came to her in whatever way it did. But to make a change like that is brave. And I didn't, I was later in life before I realized that that's how it happened. But I think back to how I have been impacted and everyone in my family has been impacted by that decision, by that one decision. The legacy of the bravery of one person really did impact generations. And I am unbelievably grateful for her, who passed before I was born. Mm-hmm. But I always, I remember and appreciate her bravery, and how that impacted. And that actually brings me to a poem I want to share, because poetry was another topic. Can I do that, or did you want to ask your question?
No, it's perfect. Let's hear it, because now I want to hear it too.
Okay. So this is Rupi Kaur, and the poem is, I stand on the sacrifices of a million women before me, thinking, what can I do to make this mountain taller so the women after me can see farther? Legacy.
I do love that. And so first tell me why you love it.
Because the idea that, the efforts that we make, it's paying it forward. It's making things better in some way for someone else. I just happened across the obituary that I wrote for prac studies. You know what I'm talking about? So in practitioner studies, there's a place where you write your own obituary. And I somehow I happened upon it in my Google Drive, and I said, oh, let me read this. It's been a few years. And what it talked about at the end was my great desire to leave things better than I found them. So that's what touches me about this poem, is that her great desire to leave things better than she found them.
And that word legacy, a lot of times people think it means, or they think about it as, well, your legacy is like how much money you have amassed or left or shared. Or they think about legacy as, you have to be the president of the United States or the governor of a state or a prince in another country, right, in order to have a legacy. But I love the example and the reminder that no, every one of us is leaving or passing down a legacy to the people who knew us and to the future generations who'll never meet us. And many people don't often think about that and make conscious choices about how I want to be remembered or what I will be leaving behind. Or we think about it because we have been told we have a medical diagnosis and we've been told we have a few months to live. And we can be thinking about it all the time, as you said. I want to leave the world better than I found it. Yeah, I love that. And that poem that you shared, who was the author, the poet?
It's Rupi Kaur, Kaur.
I love that. And so did Lenora Billings Harris. It touched her soul. Wow, wow, wow. So I do have a question, and I'm just checking the time. We've got about 7 minutes, 6 or 7 minutes. And often I start with this question, but not today. So I do want to ask it, though. So for you personally right now, in your very busy and very demanding life, what spiritual practices are you using? What's working for you? Because as you're thinking, what I find is that, I might go through cycles, but often people are curious, what are you doing now to be grounded or to remind yourself or to get back to center when you're off center? What spiritual practices are up for you in your life?
Well, meditation is definitely my go-to that I depend on. I'm also right now using a 369 journal. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a kind of a manifestation tool where you write down what you're focusing on 3 times in the morning, 6 times at lunchtime or at noon, and 9 times at night. It also asks you to write your action steps that you're going to take today towards that goal, and also what you're going to do to take care of yourself that day. And so that having that daily reminder. So in the morning, I'll read my daily Science of Mind message, and then I'll do my 369 journal. And what I really like about the format of this particular journal is that, yes, you're writing your affirmation or your what you're trying to manifest, but you're also writing some definite action steps. And that's right there to me, treat and move your feet, right? So it's very foundational, but it's also giving me that prompt of what am I going to do to take care of myself today. And a lot of times what to be kind to myself, because this is a big undertaking here. And though I could say that this is absolutely what I am here to do, it doesn't mean it's easy every day, right? There is a lot of feet moving that's involved in this particular project. And so that nice little reminder of what I can do for myself today is very helpful. So I've been using that. I also use the labyrinth, which you see behind me in my screensaver here. Years ago, CSL used this site as the site of their teen camp, and they built a labyrinth on the site. Over the years, the labyrinth had kind of fallen into disrepair. And so after we purchased it just this last May, we had a project. 55 people came from 5 states, and we rebuilt the labyrinth in 1 weekend. And it is now such a sacred and powerful and important site. And so, it's on the property that we're caring for. And so I will go down there and spend some time in that. And it's amazing to see the impact of that. So one thing that started to happen, which I had nothing to do with, it just somebody did it, and then it started to happen, is that the people who get married here, either separately or together, are walking the labyrinth on the morning they get married. Isn't that beautiful? And that was it just happened spontaneously. And I'm just, so moved by that. You just never know. They say, build it and they will come. You don't know who's coming or what they're going to do, when you build it.
Right.
But yeah, but having that labyrinth is also something wonderful. I walk when I can. I have a emotional support dog, Coco, who is the camp's mascot, and I spend time cuddling with her, and she is the constant reminder of spirit and spirit's love, because she is always worried about where I am and what's going on with me, constantly, 24 hours a day. And that is such a good spiritual reminder of source. Yes. She herself is, that's a spiritual practice, having an animal that loves you that way.
Well, and people joke about dog is just God spelled backwards. But when you have a Coco around that's cheering you on or cheering you up, whichever you need, right? That as Coco is running around and being loved by everybody, and then realizes you're not there and comes to find you, make sure you're okay. It is very much like, oh, this is my little personal God, right?
Yeah, definitely a gift.
Yeah, I love it. Although Wayne is reminding us all that Wayne likes cats, and I like cats and dogs. But yeah, I love that people joke about, and maybe it's not a joke, maybe it is just, truth, that God is dog, or dog is God spelled backwards. So
well, I also just want to put in about the poetry again, that I find when I have emotions that are too big, like I'm struggling with it, I'm feeling a lot of grief, or I'm feeling a lot of, whatever the emotion is, that one thing that helps me is haiku. Because there's because there's something about trying to bring all of that emotion in and synthesize it down into very, very few words that really gets at it in a way that I find a release from. It's that practice of just mining that feeling, trying to put it into very few words and syllables that helps me.
Wow. I'm just planting that in my brain that maybe I will try that. I love poetry, and I am also not a big fan of haiku.
Can I share one real quick?
I would love it if you did. Yeah.
So this one I wrote when an uncle of mine passed, who was very funny, your funny uncle. And so this is it. My funny uncle jokes were boy for love. How well laughed we were.
Nice. Nice. And I am intrigued by the idea of the assignment, right? The assignment of using haiku as a form of poetry that it gives me the discipline, like the rigor of taking all this bigness that emotion often feels like, and putting it into some concise but very powerful, a concentrated form. And yeah, I love that. So, anything else? Like when I invited you to be on Poetry Prayer Practice and come hang out with me, was there anything else that came to mind that we haven't talked about, because our time is about up? We have about 3 minutes. But is there anything else related to poetry, prayer, or spiritual practice that was in your heart or in your mind that you want to share?
So just very quickly, I will say we didn't talk too much about prayer, but I would just say that being running a nonprofit where prayer is part of the organizational solution to what might come up, where we're serving with like-minded people, to where when we don't know the answer in this moment, we turn to spiritual mind treatment. We had somebody here this last weekend who was having some sort of struggle, and so we stopped and treated with that person. There's just an integration that I feel that again is an amazing opportunity. And one of the things where I feel, and maybe I just don't know enough, but I feel as if we are somewhat on the cutting edge, or the leading edge, not cutting edge, but the leading edge of really trying to figure out how we walk the walk and talk the talk. How do we really how do we handle conflict management in a nonprofit organization, bringing in spiritual principle? How do we look at ourselves when we get hooked? What are the tools that we use to ground ourselves and to make sure that we are either staying in principle or returning to principle as quickly as possible, right? And we're practicing that every day, and trying to figure it out. And so I often looking for other people who are trying to do the same thing, because there's one thing about home office it's a nonprofit that's also doing the similar thing, but it is CSL, right? So we're a little bit different because we are working with people who aren't necessarily, involved in the movement. We have employees who are not part of the movement. And so, how do we really do that in a way that is inclusive and uplifting to the people who work here, that's not pushy, that's not judgmental, that's offering something, but not, challenged by choice, right? So, if there's something on the menu that you'd like to try, you're welcome to do that, but no one's forcing you to eat it. All of that, it's very challenging and invigorating. And I guess I would, if there's anybody listening who's doing something similar, who would be somebody that I could, that we could work together, share ideas on, I would love to talk to you, because I feel like what we're doing is important, and I would love to talk to others.
I think what you point to in that is, we say a lot that we can take this philosophy and we can take a new thought approach to living into all the places we are, our jobs, our communities, obviously our families, but not everybody does that in a conscious way. So I relate to you in that regard, because all the work that I've done with corporations and associations around diversity and inclusion has actually been birthed from my spiritual belief that diversity is a divine idea, and that there were no, creator source doesn't make mistakes. And so the fact that we've been created in ways that we look different, we have different sexual orientation, we speak different languages, we live in different parts of the world, we all of the ways we're different, it's not a mistake. And so our job is, if we believe in spiritual principle, to demonstrate love and unity and harmony and those qualities and aspects that are the attributes of spirit and source and the creator. But doing that, going to company XYZ and they're an IT company or a technology company, or going to help leaders from a nonprofit association that is focused on the real estate industry. Well, yeah, I'm not going there giving them a sermon or a Sunday talk or teaching them the course. But how do I show up and how do I help them come to as close as they can to that? Because it's so universal, or it's so what they need and they love it. And so it is hard. At least for me, that's how I relate to what you're saying about, you're running a camp, and it's a camp, it's a retreat center, it's a wedding and events location. It's beautiful, right? The background behind you is just one little small area of this most amazing property. And how do you do it without preaching?
Right.
But people get it.
Well, and how do you do it without othering, right? Because we don't want to be like, well, this is our approach if you're New Thought, and this is how we treat you if you're not. No, that's not it, right?
That's not it.
That's not it, right? So to serve with love and that respect for the divinity of each person, even when they don't see themselves as divine, right? That's the work.
It is. And you're doing the work. Your team is doing the work. It's so amazing. And I have on the screen, if people want more information, to visit Camp Cedar Ridge OR for Oregon .org. And if you want to reach out to Kasey directly, there's a contact link right there on the website. Kasey, thank you so much for saying yes. I love this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And everybody, stay tuned. We've got some great guests coming up. If you're listening to this live and in real time, next week is actually Halloween. And there are all kinds of things related to Halloween or different types of spiritually grounded practices near or around October 31st and the harvest season. So we're going to talk about some of the many varied practices that are linked to spiritual systems that happen in late October or during the harvest season. And my guest will be Dr. Raina Putter. So please join me. And if you can't join next week, or if you're listening to this, you can always check out the archives at New Thought Media Network on YouTube, especially easy to find, or on Facebook. And you can see what shows are coming up and what shows we have recently done. My name is Tracy Brown, and I am delighted that you have joined us at Poetry, Prayer, and Practice this week. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week. Or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/New Thought Media Network. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.